Hey, friends, this is Michael Kingswood, and I decided to do a stream a little off my normal schedule. And probably won't be a lot of people watching this, but that's okay. Those of you who don't know me, I write fiction for fun and profit, hence the story time accolades up top. Now, I don't normally do politics on this channel, just because I'm focusing more on my stories like this that I wrote. But I felt the desire to comment on the recent events and electoral process because a lot of other people are, and I was a little bit involved, and figured I'd talk about it. So I had a real lot of fun on Tuesday, election day, because I was a poll worker here in San Diego, and I had never done that before. I decided I was going to just, since I'm self-employed now, I can make my own schedule. And I felt the desire and need to see how the process works, help out as I can, and you know participate. Since I'm never going to run for office, nobody would elect me. But beyond that, just as you know, as a patriot and as somebody who's thinks this sort of thing is cool, I figured I'd participate. Same thing as I like to do. Most people, when they get jury duty summons, there's like, oh, hell, can I get out of it? But every time I've been called in and actually had to go in, I'm like, man, I hope I get a case. Because I think it'd be cool to participate, but also because it's an important thing. And if everybody who is participates is only the people who don't have anything better to do, or couldn't get out of it somehow, it kind of cheapens the whole thing, right? So I like to think I'm a pretty smart guy, not entirely ignorant about such certain things. So when these sorts of things come up, you know, apparently I want to jump in. I have not yet been called to jury duty. I've not yet had to serve on a jury, gotten to serve on a jury. I was close. I was in the selection pool, and then they got all their people and said the rest of you go home. And it's like, all right, fine. Well, that was. But this year I did get to do the poll worker thing. And it's interesting because going into it, there's a lot of hay made about election security, as well there should be, right? Because there's no point in having an election if fraud can occur, right? Or if people can flood the thing with all kinds of ballots and nobody cares, and just so then it becomes a fake bit of kabuki theater, and it what's the point, right? Then you end up being like like Stalin said, doesn't matter who votes, it only matters who count the votes. But and there's a lot of been made about voter ID, which I concur with. I at least in principle, it's like, hey, if somebody's showing up to vote, they should be identified, make sure they're eligible to vote, they're a real citizen, and that the person who's casting the ballot is the real person who's casting the ballot. Now, California, by law, you cannot ask for an ID. I found it interesting though. On the day of, a significant portion of the people who came to vote fished their driver's license out and said, "Hey, here's my ID." Is like, uh, dude, I can't ask for that, but thanks for showing me. And it is what it is. So that having said, knowing that was the law in place here, going into it, I was a little bit like, I guess, a little leery. Then I learned the background of how things operate, and it made me feel a lot better about how the process works, even in a place where you don't require the person who shows up to identify themselves. Because so the way it works, I can't speak of any other state, but the way it works here in California is that guy shows up to vote, or gal, but I'm just going to say guy because English language, deal with it. Guy shows up to vote, and he says, "Here's my name." And he fills out all his paperwork, and he comes in, and then you go to check him into process, and we had these tablets that are interfaced with the county registrar of voters. So you enter in their info, and it comes up, boom, okay, verify this person's in on the register. Now, if they've done a mail-in vote ballot, or they've already cast a ballot somewhere else, it'll come up with a little flag saying this person has already voted. And then it's like, okay, well, what's next? By law, you can't turn it away. You have to give them a ballot, let them vote. But to what goes into a different provisional stack, an envelope, and then when it gets sent back to the registry of voters, they do the signature check. And when I was doing the training for this position, it was like, man, the ladies who were training us were like, man, you can go in. There's the registrar of voters. Their signature room actually is open. You can go. You can't walk in, but you can watch what they're doing. But apparently because when you get your driver's license and other things, you sign all these things. It's all put on file under your name and the registrar of voters. And so they go and you can check your signature against everything else. So if they get two different ballots from one person, they will compare signatures, and the one that doesn't match gets tossed. Because sometimes what'll happen, California, sometimes what'll happen is someone will show up to vote, right? And they'll get logged in. Once you get logged into the system, it says this person has voted. But sometimes things happen, right? Your kid calls you, an emergency comes up and you have to leave. You can come back later, but you've already been logged in the system, and the system will flag you saying you have already voted. But they don't want to turn that person away, so then they go and say, okay, here's a provisional ballot. You go and you fill it out, and they send it, and they figure it out at the registrar of voters. Say somebody shows up who is not previously registered to vote. Here in California, the procedure is, well, we take their information, log them into the system, boom, 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 give them a ballot. That becomes a different sort of ballot that gets put in a different stack, and they go and they verify the data at the registrar of voters. Now, at least theoretically, this means that you don't have to check somebody's ID at the place, but the people in the back room will then go and make sure this person's valid, that there's only one ballot cast for each person, and that the person is registered to vote here, but they're not registered somewhere else, at least in the state, right? And so that's the check, and that's how California, despite the lack of having to require an ID, does validate that people are in fact, only voting who are supposed to vote, and that there's no duplication of ballots. And at the end of the day, you box everything up, you seal it, you sign it. Everybody who's at the site signs it, and two people bring it to the registrar of voters, drop it off. It's then sent into the counting room and counted, and whatever they do. Right. So there's multiple checks along the way to make sure that the ballots received are secured, and that the people voting are in fact also legit to do it. Now I know what you're saying, Kingswood. Is like, hey, well, doesn't that put the impetus back on the people in the register of voters? And it could be a weak link there. Yeah, it could, right? Because you have the people who are registering the same day, or their provisional ballots that get sent back. It has to be verified. And certainly if there are shenanigans going on back at the office, that's possible. But at some point, you have to trust people, right? No matter what sort of system you put in place. You got to trust that the people working the system in the back ends are, in fact, doing their jobs, and people of good conscience, and even back in the office, I don't know all the procedures they take back there, but it's never one person checking this stuff. So even though California doesn't require ID, I left the poll worker experience feeling a lot more comfortable that it would be pretty hard to have shenanigans going on, because there's a lot of fuss made with mail-in ballots. It was like, oh man, there's lots of possibility for chicanery there. Yeah, true, but every ballot has to be put up, and we saw what happened in Washington and Seattle and a couple other places where some of the drop off boxes were, incendiaries put in them or what have you. And that's not good. But in terms of duplication of ballots, at least the way California does it, once a ballot comes in with that one person, there can only be one ballot per person actually registered as if in the final count in the system. So you couldn't go and fill out like 6 different ballots for one person and have them all count. That just wouldn't be, per the procedures they have in place, it wouldn't work. So I felt pretty good learning all that. Made me feel real good about the process. And above and beyond that, Tuesday was a lot of fun at the poll, working with all the other people there. Most of those other people have been there for several days. The station I was working at opened up 4 days before I got there. I only got to work the one day and the next day to close it up. But a great group of folks. Everybody was there. Everybody was cheerful and wanted to do a good job to give everybody a good experience for everybody coming through. And we ended up servicing like about 1,000 people coming throughout the day. And most of the time I was in the check-in, logging people in, but a couple times I helped man the machines, and then I also did out front for a bit. The other thing I learned about was these they call them a ballot marking device, not a voting machine, because that makes people feel weird about it. So it's not a machine, it's a marking device. Terminology, very important. I had never dealt with one of these electronic things before. Always before, when I was in the Navy, I was always doing an absentee ballot. So I was always, filling it out on paper and mailing it back to Florida. And then since I retired from the Navy here in California, I'd always just gotten the mail-in ballot, and I just used that and turned it in, right? But so I'd never seen these electronic machines before. The ones we use were from Dominion, and I know that a lot of people have that name, and it's like, oh God, from the 2020 thing. But it's interesting. Those things are not connected to the internet. They're self-contained. You enter a little code to get the right ballot pulled up for somebody, and then they print out a paper ballot that then gets put into the ballot box, and then it gets collated and sent to the county center. And it's got a little QR code on it, so they can count it really quickly. And none of the voter identifications on that ballot. It's just numbers of who voted for what based on the QR codes. So that hard to mess that up too, right? Hard to have chicaneries with that too, unless somebody were to put some kind of weird code in the machines themselves to tweak things. But how would you know how much to tweak it? So I think I feel a lot better about the security things, having been at the polls and see how that works too. I found it interesting. So the tablets that we had to log people in were connected to the Register of Voters database, but the actual voting machines themselves were not self-contained. So that was neat to see that. So we were opened at 6, went till 8, took the good 45 minutes or so afterwards, tab to get everything squared away. And then 2 people drove it to the Register of Voters, and we saw what happened with the counting and all that stuff after that. So it was a good experience. There were 2 little weird quirks that happened while I was manning the polls there. The one time when I was actually doing duty on the ballot machines themselves, I showed this one young lady how to. I set it up for her, showed her how to do everything, and then I'm walking around past the other booths, and this one older lady was turning around and trying to call to the lady I just talked to. I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" She's like, "Oh, well, that's my daughter. I want to make sure that she knows how to do it." And it's like, "Oh no, I just showed her how to work it. She's good." She's like, "Yeah, that's how to vote. I want to make sure she knows how to vote." I was like, "You mean voting for the right person?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Yeah, I can't do that here. This is the polling station. We don't talk about who's voting. You should have figured that out earlier." And she's like, "Oh, well, I mean, she can vote for Trump all I care. I'm worried about the other things." I'm like, "Okay, it doesn't matter. You can't talk to somebody else at the polling while they're taking the vote about what they're voting. You can't do it. And she's like, yeah, you're right. And so that was just kind of an amusing little episode. The other thing, which I'm of two minds about, was when I was at the front outside doing crowd control, we would collect people who, we had the bag where we could collect the mail-in ballots, the people that the state sends out. We can collect them and put them in a bag there, or people can go inside and do the machines. Um, and at that point, we had a pretty good crowd inside, so I was doing line control, hey, 5 at a time, whatever, going in. And this one lady, she called me over. She's like, "Sir, I have mental disability." I'm like, "Okay, well," she was feeling very claustrophobic and very, pressed by all the people around. And it's like, okay, people had been backing off her after she told that to give her space, but it was like, hey, how are we going to do this? And because inside she wasn't sure she can be able to handle it. And so offered a couple different suggestions. And, do you have your mail-in ballot? Can we just deposit? No. Can we do this, and nothing was good. It was always, you're not hearing me, you're not listening to me. It's like, and now I'm going to lose my space. So I brought her inside and was talking to her and trying to figure out a way that she could be comfortable to do her thing. But it was like nothing was working. Nothing was working. Every suggestion, I went through 5 or 6 different options of things that we could do, and I didn't even think about. We have this thing you can roll out to the curb for disabled people. They have a battery powered electronic station where you can roll on over to the car so people can tap their things at the car. And the site manager came over, was like, "Why would we do that?" And of course, like, "No, you're not listening to me. I can't do this." And every single solution we gave, this woman just would not say yes to. Said no to everything, and then kept on talking about me and me and me. You not listening to me, and everything has to be about me. And I'm about to lose my mind. But the site manager is like, "Yeah, I got it." And eventually, she took care of everything and got the nice lady to. She took her off to the side, dealt with her personally, and she was able to do her thing. And she's like, "Yeah, no, you can't always see disabilities like, we accommodate people." And it's like, "Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm not unsympathetic, but man, at some point you offer 6 or 7 or 8 different options, and it's always no, and no, and me. You're not me. Do it for me. Do things for me." I'm like, at some point, I just wanted to shout, "Damn it, woman. You're coming to a poll station. You know there are other people around. And you say you're, uncomfortable around people and stuff, but you knew you're coming here and you were mailed a ballot. Why didn't you just fill out the one and give it to us that you were mailed, and then give it to us so you wouldn't have to deal with all this?" But it's like a incessant dealing with me. And it took away from me and the site manager's time, away from everybody else for a good long time. It's like, I'm not unsympathetic, but at the same time, it's like the it was sort of bordering on narcissism. It's like, come on, if you were focused less on yourself, maybe you wouldn't have the problems you have. But I mean, it is what it is. So those are the only 2 weird things that happened during my day at the polls. Overall, it was a really great time, good experience, and enjoyed it a lot. We kept it fun, kind of joking around with each other, and good crew. The next morning, we came back and got everything packed up real quick, faster than I thought it would be, and so I was insulated from a lot of the election day drama because we were head down working. And of course, I was interested in what's going on, but you're not going to go, putting on, not going to turn on CNN or whatever on the screen at the polling station. That just wouldn't be appropriate. And not going to talk about, electoral preferences or who's up or who's down or whatever at the polling station, because that would be inappropriate too, right? So it wasn't really until we were closing everything down that started looking at the returns that were coming in from the East Coast. I'm like, wow, it looks like Mr. Trump is making a splash. And we came back. I and was like, man, that was I saw what happened that night, and the next morning went and closed up, packed up the polling station, and I found on the way home that Stone Cold Steve Austin has his own beer line. I was passed by a beer stop on the way home, and I was like, we need some beer. I was like, holy cow, holy cow, Stone Cold has beer. So I had to try it, and that was good stuff. So overall, I would say my polling worker experience was great. And yeah, it made this election day for me quite a bit different from anyone I've had before. Now, that said, it's been very interesting uh, seeing the results and the reactions to the results from online and all this other sort of thing. Uh, I personally am fine with it. I'm good with what happened. I am generally a liker of Mr. Trump because, you know, in my lifetime, there are only two presidents who didn't start a new war. That was Jimmy Carter, but of course he had the Iran hostage thing. So, and then Mr. Trump. Every other president has started a new war or invaded somebody. Right? Say whatever you else you want about him. Didn't do that. And since he got out, we've got three. Okay. So it is what it is. But there's a couple things I see what there's a couple things that lead up to the election that left a little sour in my in my in my throat, and a couple things going back a little ways that did. And haven't really talked about it till now, but let's talk about it and go ahead and talk about it because as long as I'm on the long as I'm on the subject here. The first one that I find interesting is this. Let me share this. This is a tweet that I saw yesterday showing the numbers, Democratic poll numbers for the last, 6 elections. And you see that little jump up in 2020, and now suddenly it's back down to the mean from 24. Yeah. Yeah. Back in 20, it's funny. There's a lot of deception in politics. There's a lot of lies. And I think some of the biggest lies that we've seen were back with that election, right? We all watched in real time the chicanery. In my entire lifetime, they've always had the results the night of. Until that night, they said, "Oh, well, we got to stop." And then suddenly at 2 a.m., you had well, we just found a whole bunch of ballots for this guy and not for the other guy. How is that possible? Well, it's not, right? It's obviously not. It was obviously fraudulent, and we all saw it, but then we were gaslighted not to. The other thing we were gaslighted about, which they were continuing to try to talk about through this build up of this, was the whole January 6th thing. Now, I was still working corporate at that time. And I was working from home, but I had my business laptop here, and I had Twitter open here that day. And I saw some stuff was going down on Twitter, and I sort of stopped paying attention to business for a little bit. And I watched that whole thing go down, the insurrection. I watched it go down a couple different live streams. And I saw the Capitol Hill police pull aside the Jersey barriers and wave people on. I saw the Capitol Hill police open the doors up and wave people inside. I saw the Capitol Hill police walking and smoking and joking and taking selfies and signing autographs with people inside. And at the time, I was thinking, well, the police are letting them in. Trump's the president. Oh, surely this must be part of his plan. Well, this seems kind of cool. And the next day, when I didn't know about the Ashley Babbitt thing until later, but I saw the video of that, and I saw her, pounding on a door with two Capitol Hill police people standing right next to her doing nothing, and then another guy coming around the corner and shooting her and then leaving. When she ain't, you can't use deadly force except self-defense, defense of others, or to prevent a forcible felony. Even a cop, especially cops, can't do that. That woman was not attacking anyone, not threatening to attack anyone, and the two cops right next to her had no problem with what she was doing until their buddy came around the corner and shot her. So you can't say that that was anything other but murder. It's all on video. If you haven't seen it, well, that's on you. So, but I didn't see that part until later. But the next day, when all the Republicans were decrying it, and like all the standard lily-spined people were like, "Oh, I can't believe it," and I was like, "What the hell are you guys talking about? This was your team doing it. Don't back off now. Go with it." And then I discovered who the Capitol Hill Police works for. It ain't the president. It's the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And then it all clicked into place for me. And then later, when we found out that the FBI had all kinds of people in that crowd, it's like, okay, that whole thing was a setup job. But they still have, through this whole campaign, we're talking about it as if it was true. The other thing, a couple other lies that really stuck out at me with this campaign. The one that was really irking me for the last couple of weeks I really talked about was this one, which it's not really a lie. It's just an utter distortion. I'm not even sure how to say it. Well, we'll deal with the direct lie first. The first direct lie was the thing about Liz Cheney, right? Here, let's see what Mr. Trump said about Liz Cheney here, because they said he wanted her to be shot. Well,
but the reason she couldn't stand me is that she always wanted to go to war with people. I don't want to go to war. She wanted to stay in Syria. I took them out. She wanted to stay in Iraq. I took them out. I mean, if it were up to her, we'd be in 50 different countries. She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. When the guns are trained on her face. They're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, "Oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy." But she's a stupid person. And I'd have meetings with a lot of people, and she always wanted to go to war with.
Right. So they tried to make that to say as though he wanted her to go to a firing squad, right? Which is the absolute opposite of what was true, right? None of us like chicken hawks who want to send other people out to fight when they're not willing to themselves. Ben Shapiro springs to mind. That little jackass was beating the war drums all in the mid-aughts. Go to war, go to war, go to war. Are you going to sign up for the military? No, I have to go to law school. Well, then shut the hell up. And he's still doing chicanery like that again. So it's on both sides, but I didn't like that lie at all. The other thing that was that. Now there was another one that's not really a lie, but it's like shows a completely infantile viewpoint that I hated, and it's endemic to politics these days. Now, this was the statement that
yesterday
this
we
is
learned
Kamala
that
here
Donald
from
Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, a retired 4-star general, confirmed
you
that
guys have all
while
seen this, I'm
Donald
sure.
Trump was president, he said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had. Donald Trump said that.
Yeah. You know what? Frankly, he's right. You guys ever heard of, well, let's not talk about individuals here first. You got to understand the previous war before World War II, it's World War One, and then there's the Crimean thing, but that was part of World War One. The World War One, it was trench warfare. It was like people getting torn up pieces. It was slow. It was hard. All this stuff. World War II came along, and the Nazis had the Blitzkrieg. And you want to talk shock and awe? It was like people were shocked. They invented modern maneuver warfare, right? They, took the Poland up through Danzig and beyond quickly. They took France in 2 weeks, because they were doing a style of war that blew everybody's mind. They were completely unprepared for. The general staff, they were dedicated, they were smart, they were aggressive, they were loyal to their country, and they got the job done, right? They were not these perfume princes sitting around the Pentagon like we have now. And you had guys like, you ever heard of Rommel? They called him the Desert Fox. This guy was legendary, right? He's still taught now, right? When he led the Panzer Division into France, he was there digging out and help the rivers to help them make their fording devices. When he brought his unit in, they captured an enemy unit of 2,000 people and only took 35 casualties or something. And then they sent him to North Africa, and he was the Lion of the Desert. That's where he got the name from. And he was just destroying everything. Just ridiculously impressive tactical success Rommel had, right? Tearing through, doing awesome. The only reason he lost in the desert is because the U.S. Navy and the British Navy were able to resupply over, and the U.S. was in the war by that time. They brought in a lot of troops with Montgomery and a little other guy named Patton, who, ended up driving him out. But even still, he was defending Germans against the advance at Normandy and all this other thing. Rommel eventually got caught up, at least he was said to be caught up in the Valkyrie plot against Hitler, right? And they rolled up, troops surrounded his house, and they rolled up and said, "Hey, look, you got a couple choices here, buddy. You can defend yourself to Hitler directly. That's probably not going to work. You can go to the courts and defend yourself. That's probably not going to work either. And your family and all of your staff are going to get it as well. Or we got this cyanide capsule for you." He did the cyanide capsule route, and they said he succumbed from wounds in battle, right? And you had what's it called, Dönitz, who was the naval commander of the Kriegsmarine there. That guy was awesome too. He built up the Navy from nowhere, made it super, super professional. The sailors all loved him. He basically shut down the Atlantic with his U-boats. And the only reason that failed is because he made the mistake of being too centralized in his control. He wanted to control all the U-boat operations from back in Germany, so they had the Enigma code, right? So the Brits were able to crack the Enigma code. That let us know where all their wolf packs were and could go and get them. And that's the only reason that that Dönitz's plan for the Atlantic campaign failed, right? Dönitz ended up being Hitler's successor, right? And he eventually got put on trial at Nuremberg. He was acquitted of crimes against humanity, but he was convicted of planning an aggressive war and violating the laws of war, which frankly were bullshit charges. Because if you're in the military and a high-ranking military officer, you are planning for wars against all your nation's potential enemies. What do you think guys in the Pentagon are doing right now? And at CENTCOM and SOCOM and all the other places? That's what they're doing, right? That's what your job is, to plan wars. Sometimes aggressive wars, sometimes everybody does that. That's what you do. In fact, during its protests, it's like, what the hell did you want me to do? My country was going to war. My country's leader tasked me to do this. What do you want me to do? But yeah, it didn't matter because we were using a double standard at Nuremberg for that sort of thing. The other thing that was bullshit about that he was convicted of was the violating laws of war because he executed unlimited submarine warfare in the North Atlantic. Well, you know who else did unlimited submarine warfare? The United States Navy against Japan and its allies in the Pacific. So yeah, we convicted that guy for things that we did. So that's bullshit. So the point is, the German generals as a whole were really very professional, very aggressive, very good at their job and loyal to their country. So I would hope that we would want generals like that. Now, were they all good guys? No, obviously you had Goring, who was the SS guy who, deserved what he got for the atrocities they did. But and other guys, you have good and bad overall of all the stuff, but this infantile notion that somehow because a guy or a group of guys were on the side that we don't like now, that we were opposed to then, and we're opposed to now, I mean, we should be, but that we can't recognize good traits in our enemies or opponents is just stupid. They went on to people, they keep criticizing Mr. Trump. Oh my gosh, he praised Putin and he praised Xi. He's like, well, yeah. What do you say? Well, you said they're very smart guys. They're very good leaders for the company. Well, they are. They are very smart guys. They are very. What are we supposed to pretend they're not? We're supposed to be set up on this high pedestal, like, oh, we're number one and everybody else sucks. But that's how you lose. It goes to Sun Tzu, right? Know your enemy and know yourself, and you'll be victorious in 100 battles, right? If you don't know the enemy, but you know yourself, half and half. If you know neither, you'll always lose, right? You can't win if you have this infantile notion that the enemy is stupid, right? Or that they're this cardboard character cut out of evil that you have to oppose because oppose. And what's wrong with? And they also say, oh, well, he wants to work with Putin. Well, he should. There's absolutely no reason for us to be enemies with Russia or with China, right? So, but what about NATO? NATO should not exist. NATO should have been disbanded in 1992. NATO existed. The purpose of NATO was to oppose the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union. Neither of those things exist anymore. NATO needed to go away 30 years ago. All it is now is this jackasstic international imperial boondoggle that caused this war with Ukraine. That's neither here nor there. And I'm getting off topic. I'm ranting about other things. Nothing to do. Well, it does have something to do with this election because it's this infantile unwillingness to talk honestly about real things that is the reason why there's this wedge between people who voted for Mr. Trump and the people who voted for Ms. Harris, right? This incessant desire to turn the other person into a caricature and the other point of view into a caricature instead of thinking, they have rational reasons for doing what they're doing. And maybe we should actually try to figure out what those rational reasons are. And that's what people say, oh, how did people who are supporting her were like, oh, I can't believe she leaves. Well, you called half of the country a bunch of racist Nazi jackasses, garbage morons at you and completely discounting the concerns they have or the ideas they have or the thoughts they have. What do you think is going to happen? Right? I mean, whatever. Anyway, I really intended this to be me talking about the poll as a poll worker, and that was about it. But it is what it is. Anyway, like I said, I had a good time in this election day because I was at the polls and I got to see how it worked, and it was great. And frankly, I'm satisfied with the outcome because of the absolute deceit that was used by the losing side during the campaign. So, yeah, that's about it. I think I've said enough. Maybe too much, but that's my thoughts, and I'm good with that. All right. So anyway, like I said before, I write fiction for fun and profit. Most of the time on this channel, I am doing fiction stuff. On Saturday, I do Story Saturdays. We are reading through the works that I wrote last year. And this week we are reading a story on Saturday that is what is it? Little Gray Demons. It's about little gray demons. It's a fun story. The last couple, if you that's more of a sci-fi, dark fantasy kind of thing. The last couple weeks have been military sci-fi, and then last week was crime, and the next couple weeks are going to be fantasy stuff. So if you like all that sort of things, come by Saturday. We will do reading of stories. Also, occasionally, I've discovered recently that if I'm going to have a YouTube channel, that maybe. Hey, Brian, holler at your boy. MK Ultra Pasteurized is live. I'm not sure what that means, Brian, but it's good to see you. My boy Brian. He and I went sailing a while back. It's good times. We should do that some more. But you distracted me, man, because I was about to sign off. Anyway, also, like I was saying, I used to have, I discovered this thing where being silly. Okay. Oh, Michael Kingswood. Because ultra pasteurized is left. Okay. I was thinking it was the CIA thing, MK Ultra. You. All right. Well, you got me there, Brian. Well done. Well played, sir. Thanks, brother. But yeah, you're listening, but I kind of have met the end of what I was going to say, except that I discovered that an excuse to get back to video gaming, and that's because to build up the channel. So I do that here too. So I read stories, I game. Every now and then on Mondays I talk about music, and every now and then we'll do one of these things. So I'm going to sign off and leave you with that. Hopefully, haven't made you too mad. And come back on Saturday for Story Saturday. Until then, don't do anything I wouldn't do.